Hello guys, welcome back to my channel MahiIt, the digital school. So today in this video we will be talking about the introduction to database. Okay, so without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, so what is the database? Database is a place where you store the data. Okay, you might be saying, oh, that's a very obvious definition, but yeah, that is it. That's the idea behind the database. Okay, let's just take an example of your laptop. Okay, this is your system. Okay, and in this system there will be a hard drive, and in this hard drive you will be storing files, different files. So those file will get stored in the hard drive, and even when you restart the system, that uh, data will still remain the same, and that's the idea behind the database. Okay, to store the data, and that will remain as it is in that database until you make some changes into that. Okay, so but the database which we are going to talk about is currently we will be talking about the Oracle databases, which is a relational database. And in this database, the data will be stored in the form of tables. Okay, so consider this is your database. So will this database will be the collection of different tables. Okay, so consider this is DB. So for database, we short name is DB. We refer it as a DB. So DB is nothing but the database. So this is your database, and these are the tables. So consider this as a T1. This is T2. We'll talk more in detail about the table, and this is your T3. So these are different tables can consist of different data. The data can be anything. Okay, let's take an example of your school or colleges. Okay, so in your colleges there will be hundreds or thousands of students. Okay, so, and how are you going to maintain that data? So those data will be stored in the form of different tables, and those tables will be stored in this database. Okay, so we'll talk more on that, how the data will be stored in the tables. Okay, but this is the concept. Okay, the DB is nothing but the collection of tables, or you can call it as a DB objects. Okay, there will be different DB objects. So tables, constraints, views, we'll talk more on that part going forward with the different videos. So table is also one kind of a DB objects. So let's talk about more about the table. What is table? Okay, table consists of columns and rows. So you might have worked on Excel sheet. Okay, when you want to insert some data into the Excel sheet, there will be columns and there will be rows, and you will be entering the data into that. So similarly, there will be tables into the database, and the data will be stored into that tables in the forms of columns and rows. Okay, so this is your table. Let's say call it as a T1. These are your columns, and these are your rows. Okay, so this is column 1, this is column 2, this is column 3, this is column 4, this column 5, and so on. Okay, and these horizontals are your rows. So this is your R1, this is your row 2, this is your row 3, and this is your row 4. Okay, so this is how table consists. It consists of columns, combination of columns and rows, and these rows will also be referred as records. Okay, records are nothing but the rows in the table. So these columns and these rows will save the different kinds of data. Okay, and in database there will be hundreds or thousands of column based on the database size. We'll talk about how we will see some real-time example how the data will be stored in these columns. Okay, let me get some examples of the real-time tables. Yeah, so these are two tables in a real time. This is a real time example of employee table and department table. So the first one is a employee table, so let's call it as a EMP table. and this below one is a department table. So let's call it as a DBT department table. So in real time, the data will be stored like this into the table. So there will be a different columns. So these are the columns. Okay, this is first, second, third, fourth, and likewise. And these will be the row R1, R2, and so on. Okay, so if you see this example closely, there is a relation which I will be explaining how the relation is formed between these two tables. But let's discuss about the columns and how the data will stored in the these columns. So first column is a employee ID column. Second is first name, last name, email ID, phone number, hiring date, job ID, salary, and some other data related to that particular employee. Okay, employee id this will be the unique one. So if you can think, for every each and every employee there will be different id will be assigned, so that based on that id the employee can be identified. So if you see in this employee id column you will see only numbers. Okay, if you go for the first name column you will see only characters. Similarly for last name and email id, again in the phone number column you won't see any characters. Hiring date, this is a date column, so you won't see any numbers or you won't see any characters into it. So how that will be decided? Okay, so we call it as a data types. So for each and every column there will be a data type which will tell the database what kind of data will be stored into that particular column. So for employee id, the data type will be numbers, so only numbers will be stored into that particular column. For the first name column, the data type will be character or varchar. There can be a different data types which we will be discussing later. But consider as of now, this first name column will store only characters. It won't store any numbers. So if you see in this column, there are no numbers. So in employee ID, IDs will be stored. First name, last name will be stored. Here, phone numbers will be stored. And in hiring date, for this hiring date, the data type will be date. So when you mention our data type as a date for any particular column, you won't be able to store anything else apart from the date. That means we will be restricting that column to store only dates data. Okay. Same goes for the salary. And this will be the number data type. So let me write it as a number. Okay, so salary is nothing but the number data type, so it will store only number. Now same goes for the department table. There is a department id, department name, manager id, and location id, and these are the rows. These will be the rows. Okay. So in this department table, if you see for the department id there is some department name is mapped. So for 10, department 10 is nothing but the administrator department, 20 is the marketing department. So why are we storing the different data? So if we are going to real life companies, you will see there will be a different role called as a data modeler. Okay, when there is a complex data, even database developer can do this table creation and modeling. But if there is a complex data, there will be a separate role called a data modeler, whose whose profile will be just to create and design these tables. Okay, what kind of table will be needed for particular project, what column should be there, and how the relation between these tables will be formed. Those will be part of a data modeling. So okay, so when consider you become a database developer, so what will be your task is create this table, create, modify, delete, alter, these kind of operation you will be performing. And you have to retrieve the data, insert the data, manipulate the data. So these kind of operation you will be performing as a database developer. Okay, so let's talk about the relation between these two tables. Okay, so here if you see in employee table, all the details of employee are stored in different columns. But along with that there is a separate column, department id. And same column, if you observe closely, the same column is present into the table department. Okay. So there is a direct relation between these two table, based on department id column. Okay, let's take an example of Steven. Okay, so employee id of Steven is 100, first name is Steven, last name King, and accordingly the different the rest of the details. And this Steven belongs to department id 90. Okay, so based on this, let's consider for a moment that there was no other table which is the department table, and we want to store the details in a same table. Okay, in that case what we need to do, we need to create more table, we more columns which will be storing the details of Steven related to his department. Okay, so for Steven there will be administrator column, means there will be another column which will be storing the detail as a department name as administrator. Again, consider for Nina, same data they want to maintain. Okay, so there will be data duplications. Okay, for same data they have to insert multiple records. So to avoid that, the design is made such a way that for department 10 only one row will be maintained in different table, and here in this employee table we will be just mentioning its department id. So here, from here we can identify for Steven department id is 90, that means Steven belongs to executive department, like that. Okay, let's take another example of this one. Okay, so let's take an example of David. So based on this row we can identify David belongs to 60 number department id. What is 60 number department id? It's a IT department. So this is a basic example where data is less and columns are less, but there will be tables which will consist hundreds of rows, and there will be hundreds of tables which will have relation between them. Okay, so as of now just consider there will be tables which consist of columns and rows, and there will be relations formed based on the some constraints. So for forming a relation there is a constraint called foreign key, and based on that we will be forming a relation between these two tables. So that is about how the data will be stored into the database in the form of tables. Okay, if you have any question, you can write down it into the comment section. I will be answering that. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about what is how the use of database will be made into the company or in the project. Okay, how the database getting used in the company. Okay, let's consider this is your database. This is your database. Okay, then there will be a some software or some system, we call it as a dbms. dbms. Dbms is nothing but database management system. Okay, you might hear this term dbms, or you might also hear the term rdbms. Okay, rdbms. Yes. So RDBMS is nothing but the relational database management system, the system which is used to manage the relational database. Relational database is nothing but which we just discussed now. There will be relations between the data getting stored into the database. Okay, so it will be like this, and from this database management system, the data can be accessed by some app. Okay, let's consider this app one, or there it can be accessed by some user. So consider user one. So this data can be accessed by different app. Okay, this is app number 2 and this is user number 2. So same data can be accessed by multiple apps or multiple or by multiple user. So how this accessing will happen? Okay, let's consider this is, you are the user of this one. Okay, so you are here and you want to access the data from the database. That means if you take this example of this Steven. Okay, now your requirement is you want to access the data for the Steven employee. Okay, so what you will do, you will write a SQL query. Okay, so SQL is nothing but the structured query language. This is a language which is used to access the data from the database. Not only the access, insertion, deletion, anything, everything will be done from the SQL. And this is the main topic which we will be discussing more on the further videos. Okay. So in SQL, we write different queries Okay, and by that query we will be fetching the data or doing the data base operation by using the query, and those query will be executed in those queries are nothing but the part of database management system. Okay, so considering this you are a user, so you will write a query to which will tell the database management system to get the data of Steven. So what dbms will do, it will read that query, it will go to the database, it will hit that query into the database, and it will only fetch the data of employee Steven. Okay, there will be hundreds of employees, but based on your query and how you have written, it will get, this dbms will get to know that user only wants to see the data of a Steven employee, so it will go to the database and will fetch the database, fetch the data of Steven employee, and it will be provided to the user, so user will be able to see Steven data uh, on UI. Okay, similarly goes for the application. So let's take an example of application. So there will be applications like Amazon and Flipkart. Okay, so you create an account on the Amazon. Let's take an example of Amazon. So you create an account in Amazon, and the you enter some details. Okay, but when you next time go to the Amazon application, you don't have to enter the details again and again. Okay, you just log in, and based on your login credentials, the database will get to know who has logged in, and it will provide the data accordingly. So data, your data will be fetched from the database, some queries will be performed accordingly, which will be at the backend side, you won't be aware of that, but when you click on login, based on your credential, your data will only be fetched from the database. That database will consist millions of users, but only your data will be fetched, like that. So database and dbms will be used in real time life like this, which, and this operation will be performed by the SQL, which we will be talking more on the upcoming videos. Yeah, so I think that's it for this video. This was a quick introduction for the database, how the data getting stored into the database, and how it will be used by the users. Okay, if you have any question, just write it down into the comment section, and I will be answering to those. So that's it for this video. My If my video is helpful for you, don't forget to show your support by like, comment, and share. Thank you, and don't forget to subscribe.